Hello guys, welcome to Easy Bio. Today's video is going to be about variation and inheritance. First, we're going to talk about variation to make sure you understand exactly what it is. Variation refers to the characteristics of a species that are different. So for example, things like height or eye color. You probably don't have the same eye color as all your friends or even the same height. That's variation. Phenotypes are the characteristics that can be physically seen on an organism. So, using the example of eye color again, eye color is something that can be physically seen by others and is therefore a phenotype. Your phenotype is determined by the genes that you got from your parents. If we combine different genes together from two parents, there is a wide range of possibilities of how the individual will turn out. Take yourself, for instance. If you have siblings, you realize that you don't look exactly like your siblings, despite the fact that you may have come from the same parents. That's because the genes may have been combined differently, and so will end up with different traits or phenotypes. This results in variation. There are two different types of variation. The first one is discrete variation. Discrete variation describes the characteristics that are only controlled by one gene. This means that you only got one copy from each parent. They tend to be separated into distinct categories. So, for example, blood types. It is known that there are exactly 4 different blood types, and you can either fall into blood type AB, A, B, or O. Or if you want to go back to our previous example, eye color falls into the discrete variation. Eye color does not change and falls into the colors blue, brown, green, gray, or even purple. For continuous variation, it describes characteristics that are controlled by more than one gene. Another term for this is polygenic. Polygenic characteristics show a wide range of values. These values tend to follow on from each other. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. One example of continuous variation is height. Height is constantly changing, and although you do tend to stop growing after a certain age, there's a wide range of values that come with height. Many phenotypes are also affected by diet or environmental factors. So, for example, a person's height can also be affected not just by the genes, but also with the amount of nutrition that they get. Right, so we've learned about variation. Now, let's focus on inheritance. We've talked a little bit about inheritance whilst discussing variation. That's because inheritance refers to the genes you got from your parents, and the genes you got from your parents determine variation. But what exactly is a gene? A gene is made up of DNA and contains enough DNA bases to code for a protein. I know that it can be confusing figuring out what is meant by gene, chromosomes, and DNA. This diagram explains it really well. A chromosome is what carries the genetic information overall. Inside the chromosome is the DNA, which is made up of bases. Your genes, like I said, are the sections of DNA that have enough bases to code for a protein. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense now. Anyway, so usually an individual gets one chromosome with a specific copy of a gene and another matching chromosome with a copy of the gene. One of the chromosomes will be from your father, and one of your chromosomes will be from your mother. So, for example, the gene for a pea plant shape. Your mother might have the gene for a wrinkled pea plant shape, which she will then give you a copy of, and your dad might have the gene for an inflated pea plant shape, which he will then give you a copy of. The different versions of a particular gene are given a name, alleles. So in this case, the gene codes for a pea plant shape. The two alleles are the wrinkled pea plant shape and the inflated pea plant shape. The name given to the alleles an organism has is called a genotype. Phenotypes are the physical characteristics of an organism, and the genotype refers to the alleles of an organism. Alleles are usually represented by letters, so for example, E for I. There are two different types of alleles, recessive and dominant alleles. Recessive alleles are alleles that can be overtaken by their counterparts. Recessive alleles are shown by small letters, so for eye color, the recessive allele for it would be a small E. Dominant alleles, like the name suggests, are alleles that have influence over other alleles. This means that they will always be represented in a certain phenotype. Dominant alleles are shown by the big letters instead of the small letters. If two alleles of a particular gene are identical, they're called homozygous. A way to remember this is that homo means same, and so homozygous means same alleles of a particular gene. So, what do you think the name is for different alleles of a particular gene? You might have guessed this one, heterozygous. This diagram shows you how they are represented. So for the homozygous, the letters are always the same. If it is two dominant alleles, the letters will be in two big identical letters. If it has two recessive alleles, the letters will be two small identical letters. For heterozygous, it will be represented as one big letter and one small letter. Okay, now let's talk about something called Punnett squares. Punnett squares are used to figure out all the possible genotypes and phenotypes of an individual. Punnett squares show all the different possibilities and combinations of alleles. This diagram is an example of a Punnett square, and you may have seen them littered about in the video. Whilst Punnett squares are great at showing you the different possible outcomes, they cannot predict the outcome. This is because fertilization is random. So even if there is a 75% chance, as shown by the Punnett squares, that the baby will have brown eyes, the baby may end up with blue eyes instead, with the other 25%. Let's use this Punnett square as an example. This Punnett square is showing the alleles for eye color, and the B is used to represent the brown and blue eye colors. So the diagram has a big brown B to represent the brown eyes and a small blue B to represent the blue eyes. From that, we know that the brown eyes are the dominant alleles and the blue eyes are the recessive alleles. One of the parents, let's say the mum, has blue eyes. Since she has blue eyes, she needs to have two recessive alleles. If she didn't, and she had one brown allele and one blue eye allele, she would have brown eyes instead, since brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes. And that's exactly the case with dad. The dad has one brown eye allele and one blue eye allele. Since brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes, the brown eyes are the ones that are going to be represented in the phenotype. So, from the diagram, the brown-eyed alleles are only shown twice. The blue-eyed allele is represented in every grid though. However, the chances of the child being blue-eyed or brown-eyed is even. Why? This is because the brown-eyed allele is dominant, and therefore only needs one present to be shown in the phenotype. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Don't worry if you didn't understand some parts of the video. I struggle with variation inheritance as well, but it does get easier. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I will make sure to get back to you. Bye!